Hello and welcome to Chiltern Heritage Orchards. Why do you need hedges in an orchard? Stay tuned. Hedges are very important to the orchard. Why? Well, they slow the wind down. It's much better than a wall. When the wind hits the hedge, it's broken into small pieces, it's slowed down, it's filtered. And every metre of hedge that you have high, you get at least 10 metres of filtered, slowed down wind. That's very important for pollination, that's very important for the insects that are predating on our pests here. It keeps everything a lot warmer and slightly more humid. So hedges really help to slow the wind down. That's why we like to have them here. The other thing about a hedge is it's a kind of habitat which has many predators living in it. Lots of hedges were removed in the past and it was discovered that it caused soil erosion, it caused all sorts of problems with loss of habitat. We care about the hedges here because they're a kind of mixed habitat. What do I mean by that? Well, it's really a combination of a woodland and a meadow. Here we've got long unimproved grassland, pasture land that hasn't been fertilised or ploughed for decades. It's almost the same as the prairie in the US and the vast grasslands of Europe and Asia. That kind of habitat is very precious. The hedgerow is a kind of wood. Where the two habitats merge, we have what we call an ecotone. Ecotones are particularly diverse. That's where most of the predators live. The ground beetles, the centipedes, the birds that predate on the bugs in the orchard. Without the hedges, the grassland's much more exposed to drought and wind scorch. So we really need the hedges. And later on we'll be looking at how we make the hedges more diverse. Today I'm going to plant some more hedging. I've got some hawthorn. Now traditionally hawthorn was used in old orchards in the UK. Then it was realised that hawthorn can carry a bacterial disease called fire blight, which does destroy many pears in the US and apples as well. It's a real problem in the US and Canada, much less of a problem in Europe. Thankfully, we have very little fire blight here. So I feel very confident putting hawthorn in. And I've got a few in a pot left. I'm going to use them today. So here are the hawthorns that I'm going to plant. Now I've had these a year in a pot. That's too long really. They're not pot bound, but they're beginning to suffer. And interestingly, there are two things I'd like to show you. One is, if you leave the label on a plant for too long, look what happens. It dies. If you leave the label, when you buy a plant or a tree, take the label off because look, it dies. This is very, very common. It seems to be irritated and stressed. Second thing I'd like to show you is this. This is powdery mildew. This is the fungus that could, in theory, spread onto the fruit trees, particularly the apples. But I'm not worried about that because I'm going to cut this off. And I know from experience here that we have very little powdery mildew. We have very good airflow. We have a lot of UV and the nutrition really prevents too much of that. Right, we're going to plant this hedge in this little gap. I've got a reasonable amount of space here and I want to put the hawthorn in so that I'm gap filling and hopefully I'll get a good windbreak through the orchard. I'm just putting these trees in quite easily. I'll just add a little bit of root grow as I go. I've seen some worms in there, so that's a good sign. And I'll just sprinkle that in. Perhaps I can put it in these holes ready. It's getting late in the season for putting bare root plants in, and these sprouting hawthorns will need watching, so I may have to water these. But I'm hoping if we get some rain in the next couple of weeks, they'll take. Now what's interesting is that the other hawthorns have started to bud up. But as you can see, they're not really growing very quickly. So I think this year I'll do some feeding with a little bit of liquid seaweed. probably a teaspoon in a gallon. That's 5 millilitres in 4.5 litres of water. A very dilute root drench, which is perfectly good for them. And I think that'll bring in the nutrients that they're lacking. Interestingly, the damsons and the bullaces at the back, where they've been more protected, have done really well up on this earth bank. Now, the important thing to look at here is we've not just got a hedge, we've also got traditional Chiltern Ditch. So we've got the raised hedge bank and the deep ditch here along the track. What that gives us is a third habitat. We've got grassland, effectively woodland in the hedgerow, and now a water-based ecological zone, a third part to our ecotone. Sometimes this ditch gets water in it, sometimes it's dry, it catches runoff, it's a fantastic resource, and you'll probably see there's some moss growing. It wouldn't be surprising in the next couple of years if we start finding different species in here, things like ground ivy, which is a little woodland plant we have locally, and it may be possible to see primroses. We'll see what turns up. Okay, so we've planted all the hedging. I'm not going to water that in because rain's expected and the ground's very wet. They should take, they were spare, so I'm just waiting to see how they get on. I'm not putting any guards on because we find here the rabbits and the deer and the sheep actually don't eat the hawthorn. So join us again soon.